Hello everyone, welcome once again to Everfree Radio. This is Final Draft, your host, and I'm here today with one of the noted writers of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, Miss Amy Keating Rogers. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, and so I'm going to start off with a very general question I always ask every member of the production crew, which is, how did you get involved with My Little Pony Friendship is Magic?
I got involved pretty early on because Lauren Faust and I are friends, and we worked together on the Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. And she had pitched this to Hasbro, and it was, kind of going through the process that any show goes through. They once you pitch something, they go over it with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that everything is the way they want it to be. So she was waiting for the green light as this process was happening. And she said, if we get picked up, I want you to write on it. And, I thought that sounded fantastic. And so that's how I got into this.
Well, and Lauren's that kind of creative person, too, where if she says, I'd like you to do something, I imagine that you're just like, yes, please.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She and I work really well together, so I feel really fortunate that she wanted me to work on the show.
So I'm looking at your IMDb list, which is always a dangerous place to look because I'm told often by guests on the show that sometimes this isn't accurate.
Right.
Looking at your list of episodes you've written, you wrote The Ticketmaster, which was, I believe, the third episode of the first season, Applebuck season, Bridal Gossip, Fall Weather Friends, A Dog and Pony Show, Best Night Ever. And these were really personal, character-based episodes for the first season. Was that a choice by the producers of the show or by the powers that be to have you write character-focused episodes?
I think Lauren wanted to start with character episodes. I mean, it's a character-driven show. And we really needed to learn who these characters were in order to then jump into, other kinds of episodes. And everything we tried to do is character based. But yeah, we had to learn about, what is Rarity like? What is Applejack like? And really get to explore those characters. Because we're writing for kids, it helps kids learn about who are these characters that they're following. And, for the adult fans, it ends up that we ended up getting. I think it helped all of you guys really connect with those characters, it's the same thing we tried to do with the kids, but we achieved it also with adults.
Well, and you say ended up, getting that fan base. I mean, I imagine you were quite surprised by the whole Brony fandom when you first heard about it.
Yeah, we were very surprised by it. But I've said this a couple times. We had a male and an adult male fan base on Powerpuff Girls as well. So that was quite a while ago, and the internet wasn't what it is today. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have the level of, fan sites that people put up now. There wasn't, there weren't blogs. There just wasn't all that stuff. So, but we did have a male fan base. So when I found out that we had a male fan base for this show, part of me was like, it's like Powerpuff, because, that's what it reminded me of. That was my previous experience. And that was an unexpected fan base that we got on Powerpuff as well. It's just, this is just so much bigger.
Well, absolutely. I did want to take a step back and ask you a more general question about the process of writing for a cartoon, or more specifically for this cartoon, which is basically, how does it work? I mean, do the creators or the producers of the show come to you and say, okay, we need an Applejack episode, and suddenly you have Applebuck season? I mean, obviously scripts don't magically appear. What is the process for writing a script for an episode of My Little Pony?
Well, we're all freelance writers. All the writers on season 1 and 2 and on 3, they're freelance. So it's not an in-house situation. So you're not hanging out with everybody every day, bouncing ideas around. So for season 1, Lauren had actually come up with a number of those ideas in the original Bible. So we were kind of set up there with things that she had already thought of, which is what you do in a Bible. You establish all the characters, you tell about the world, and then you say, okay, if this went to series, look at all these episodes that we could write about these characters. This is the future of the show. So I know Dog and Pony Show was one of those. I'm trying to think. Applebuck season was one of the ones that was in the original Bible. So those were already established stories. Then I'm trying to remember if in season 1 we did have a writers brainstorming meeting where all the writers were gathered and we just kind of spitballed ideas around. And Rob Renzetti, the story editor, took notes through the entire meeting so that, so he knew what stories were possibilities. Then he and Lauren got together and batted those ideas around, picking the gems, coming up with their own stuff, shaping everything. And then they submit that to the network. And the network goes, yeah, we like this one. We don't really like that one. And you pick the best of that bunch. And you keep sending them bunches of ideas to fill out the season. Then those episodes, and we touched on this briefly in the writers panel, once you have those story ideas, Lauren would then assign the stories as best as possible according to people's availability and that kind of thing, assign them to people according kind of to their strong suits of what she knew that person would thrive at as a writer. Once you get your story idea, you have a meeting with Lauren and Rob, and it's just the writer and Lauren and Rob in a room. And we have a pile of index cards and a big blank wall, and we put up on the 3 index cards saying Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and we start with the teaser and go through story beat by story beat, each element, fleshing out the entire 3 acts of the story and putting in jokes if we come up with them, or saying, oh, there should be some funny stuff here, and it's sometimes left up to the writer. So you spend the day figuring out that story, and it's all on the cards. Then you take the cards down. I would come home, and with this pile of cards, I would go through and write the story. It's called an outline, and it's writing it not with dialogue in it, but just this is what the story's about. And you try and tell it so it's interesting and a good read and that kind of thing, because then that once again gets sent off to the studio and they give you notes saying, okay, this, can you tweak this, change that kind of stuff. And then you get an approval, hopefully, to move forward from the outline to the script. And then you take your outline and you start writing, you have the story totally laid out for you there, and you start writing dialogue instead of, having it told in story form.
Well, so in this whole process, it sounds like, first of all, it sounds like what Lauren was talking about during her panel at BronyCon, which is that it's a really more of an organic process and kind of more of a team process than an individual effort. I mean, would you agree with that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's as far as figuring out that story, it is those 3 people, the writer, Lauren, and Rob on seasons 1 and 2, figuring out that story, and everybody putting in, story beats or funny stuff, and, saying, okay, is that the best way? Oh, what if we did it this way? And coming up with different options and deciding on the best one as that group. So yes, it's definitely a collaboration between those people. Then you send in your first draft, and Lauren and Rob would both read it and give you notes on your script, send it back to you. You would do all of the changes, and then once they felt that the script was ready to go to the network, it was sent on to the network. So they really made sure that everything was super strong before it moved forward.
Were there any elements in any of the episodes that you wrote, either season 1 or season 2, that you really wanted to get through to that final script that ended up getting cut? Like any kind of stuff that may have gotten onto the cutting room floor that, the fans haven't heard about that you wanted to include but never got through?
There was, from The Best Night Ever, there were a couple other Pinky songs that had to get cut. It was just a very long script. And so I didn't know they were cut until I saw the episode. That's just one of those things, I'm sure, as the storyboard artist was boarding it, was going, oh my gosh, this is way too long. Or, I don't know if Rob might have, because as a story editor, you end up going through someone's script and cutting stuff. If you're saying, okay, this is going to be way too long, I'll just hack and slash this myself. It's, sometimes it's easier for the story editor to just do that. So I don't know at what stage those got cut. They could have, I don't even know, they might have been cut later on, even further. And as they went and said, wait, this episode is just way too long. So yeah, Pinky's song, anytime I write a song, I want to hear it. So, and especially Pinky being silly, that's always fun to hear. So that's the one that sticks out in my mind.
Do you remember which songs specifically were cut at all, or?
So yeah, I did. Well, I mean, with everything I talked about this in the interview I did with the guys, and I talked about it on the writers panel. With every song that I do my own version of it. And so, but in answer to your question, there was the Pinky Conga. There's the Piggy Dance, which I know a version of the Piggy Dance ended up in another episode, but mine was longer. And then she has this dopey thing called Party Ponies, where so yes, there were some songs that she sang. So
Well, so going now to your specific episodes, one of the ones that stuck out to me was the Dog and Pony Show, and you mentioned that this was one of the episodes that was inspired by material that was in that original show Bible that Lauren put together. I just have to give you all sorts of credit for making the dogs the Diamond Dogs. Was that your idea?
So that was in Lauren's original idea for them to be the Diamond Dogs, and actually in the original script, Spike says, I think he still says they call them the Diamond Dogs, and I had him say the line from the song. You know, he must. That's not correct English, so I might have changed it to they call themselves the Diamond Dogs. But I'm pretty sure I put the exact song line from the song, and Pinky then responded to the tune of this song. She went ooh 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 ooh, and we had to cut that because legal issues and stuff like that. But I think they actually tried to get clearance for it, but it would have been I'm sure a lot of money to get a David Bowie song cleared. But yeah, that was Lauren called them the Diamond Dogs.
I bet David would have gone for it, but who knows what his record label would have said. But yeah,
it's more complicated.
Well, so you have other great episodes in season 1. You have Fall Weather Friends, which pits Applejack versus Rainbow Dash. And I actually spoke with Ashley Ball a little bit about this episode, and she told me that it was the most crazy recording session for her because she was talking to herself the whole time.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. That's true. Wow. That must have been really difficult for her.
Well, and I was going to then just ask, I mean, how much of an interaction is there between the writers and, say, the storyboarders down the line, or the VAs? I mean, I have heard that really the writing is the first step, and that really it's months between the rest of the production process and the writing process. But I was just wondering if you've interacted, maybe you did a bit of this at BronyCon, but if you've interacted with the other stages of the episode production.
We actually didn't. On My Little Pony, we didn't speak to any of the storyboard artists or the voice actors because they were all in Canada. So had this been a show that was all done in America and was all in-house, if we had all been in the studio together, we would have had that interaction where in that kind of setting, the writers are there and the storyboard artists are there, and then you can go to the recording session. For instance, on Care Bears, because that show is recorded here, as the story editor, I go to every recording session, and that way I'm there to tweak any lines and do any adjustments. If the script, something that sounds fantastic in your head, sometimes when you say it out loud is really clunky. So you have to kind of tweak and adjust the lines. And then with Care Bears, I was able to, if an actor wasn't necessarily getting what I was hoping to get from the line, you can kind of say, oh, it's like this, and you can help clue them in. Though they usually come up with way better things that were ever in my head anyhow, which is why they're, so cool. I know with Pony, when Lauren was on it, I'm pretty sure Lauren did interact with the storyboard artists. And I think she was in on all of the recording sessions as well. But that was kind of her overarching job. So while the writers didn't do it, it was looked after by Lauren.
So in an ideal setting then, let's say you had somehow some magical control over the production of a cartoon, would you have it where the writers and the VAs and the storyboarders and that there would be more of that kind of interaction if travel wasn't a barrier?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then it's great when everybody's in-house together, because then if I as a writer have written something and the storyboard artist is boarding it and saying, I don't know what you mean by this direction you've given here, you can talk about it and see if you can figure it out and make it better. So that's always nice to have that back and forth. But that being said, every episode that I've watched of Pony, I've been so happy with what the storyboard artists have done. And I think they plussed every, what my script was and what it ended up being. They put so many more fun visuals in there and just made it very, very complete.
So in a sense, you don't necessarily have a sense of ownership over the episodes that you've written. It's more like a team approach then?
Oh, yeah, it has to be a team thing. I mean, yeah, I'm the writers are the first step, but it's so funny to watch episodes that you can watch an animatic, which is, this rough version of the animation, and you go, okay, well, yeah, that looks pretty okay. But then when it gets, more fully animated, it's looking better, but not, you'll see an episode and it won't have sound effects, and it'll seem so strange. And then it gets music. If it doesn't have music, it seems slow, and just every piece builds on each other until it's complete. So the words are just so, the very beginning step, and it's definitely a collaboration.
My first question for you, when you're approaching the second season of this show, when you started writing for season 2, did you already know about the whole brony movement at that point, or was it somewhere midway or even after writing for season 2 that you found out about it?
That's a really good question, and I'm trying to remember. I don't think I knew about. If I knew about him, it was like, oh, we have a male fan base. And I don't even know if you guys were called bronies at that point, because you have to realize we write these episodes, 9 months before they air. So, we were writing season 2 as season 1 was on the air. I don't think the bronies were as big an entity at that point, or they might not have gotten the name yet.
They definitely were still growing at that point.
That's when you guys, were kind of discovering the show. And so when we were doing season 2, you guys were still super excited over season 1, but we didn't necessarily know that.
So Amy, you mentioned that you did a lot of original versions for the different songs that were in your episodes, and you also did some versions of songs that didn't end up in the episodes. Could you give us a little sampling of what you might be hiding from the fandom?
What is secretly hidden? I did my own version of Evil Enchantress. At that point I was thinking that Pinky's singing might be kind of off key, and that was part of her odd quirkiness. And we've obviously heard her sing now, and she sings wonderfully on key. This is because this was, I don't know, this was probably my third episode. I'm trying to remember which episode it was, but it was an opportunity for Pinky to sing, and it was such a silly song. So this was my version, and it is meant to sound a little bad, just FYI. Okay. She's an evil enchantress, and she does evil dances, and if you look deep in her eyes, she will put you in trances. Then what will she do? She'll mix up an evil brew, then she'll gobble you up in a big tasty stew. So watch out!
Well, they used those exact lyrics for the song too.
It's just he made it sound a heck of a lot better, because I was just thinking she'd be really kind of dissonant and off key, but I'm sure that'd be really hard for people to listen to, so they made her sound much better. And my version, I have a version of the Grand Galloping Gala from Ticketmaster, but things that got cut in The Best Night Ever, there was supposed to be a conga, and so Pinky was supposed to sing.
You've got this Piggy song apparently.
Oh yeah, it was originally in The Best Night Ever, and got cut, and then it appeared in the one that Charlotte wrote, the Baby Cakes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that they moved it. I'm trying to imagine where it would have fit in Best Night Ever.
It's before she goes into the Pony Pokey. So in the original script, Pinky sings that, did the piggy dance, and then I think there's we cut to Fluttershy doing something, and then it goes into Pinky singing the Pony Pokey.
And why not, right?
Exactly. Well, she was trying to get the crowd stirred up and get them dancing and not be so boring and stiff. So she was starting with the piggy dance and then moved on. That one wasn't working. So she moved on to the pony pokey. Okay, ready? First you jiggle your tail, then you wriggle your snout, then you wiggle your rump, oink, 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 oink. First you jiggle your tail, then you wriggle your snout, then you wiggle your rump, oink, 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 oink. First you jiggle your tail, then you wriggle your snout, then you wiggle your rump, oink, 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 oink. First you jiggle your tail, then you wriggle your snout, then you wiggle your rump, oink, 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 oink. Come on and dance just like a piggy. Come on, it's easy as can be. Just sing and dance along with Pinky. It's fun to piggy dance with me.
That was actually quite beautiful in a sense. You're a great singer.
Thank you.
I could never in my entire life sing like that, and because I would never be in key, but they should have used that.
It's pretty funny. Well, but then they got to use it where they used it, but the chorus had to get cut, I guess, which is one of my favorite parts of it.
Oh, that's great. Well, so it's basically, what is it?
It's the chicken dance.
Yeah, it's the chicken dance.
And in my version, I found online what I sent to them. I found online an instrumental version of the chicken dance and sang it along to that. So it, like, the intro is da 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 da. That cracked me up. So just silliness of it and imagining Pinky doing it.
You were doing the Evil Enchantress song. You wrote Bridal Gossip, and I have to ask you this just as a quick tangent. How difficult is it to write for Zecora?
I have a hard time with it because I like writing in rhyme. And Zecora originally didn't rhyme. And when I got notes back from Lauren and Rob, the note was to make her more interesting, to make her stand out somehow, because she just kind of talked. And so I decided that if she spoke in rhyme, it would just be very distinctive and, somewhat Shakespearean, and would give her kind of an authority, even though a lot of times rhyming can skew young and seem too much like, nursery rhyme. I thought with the voice that I knew that they were going for, that it would sound really cool. And so for me, it's fun to write in rhyme for her.
Well, I speak on behalf of the hundreds, if not thousands, of fanfic writers out there and saying, why? Because I know a lot of fanfic writers out there, they try to write for Zecora and they just have a hard time with it because it all has to rhyme.
I'm sorry.
Actually, I think it's one of the greatest parts of her character. I mean, I think that kind of little detail there really adds a level. I mean, it's very distinctive for her.
Yeah, it just gives her this special authority, I feel, and makes her more mysterious because she, speaks so unusually, and sometimes you can't figure out what she's saying. So yeah, I think that makes her very special.
Well, okay, so are there any other songs from the series that you wrote that people haven't heard the original versions of that you're willing to share with this enraptured audience?
Gosh, the Grand Galloping Gala. Let me do my Grand Galloping Gala version. So this is from Ticketmaster, and you know the other version, but my version was, oh, the Grand Galloping Gala's the place for me. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala's the place for me, 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 for Pinky. With decorations like streamers and fairy lights and pinwheels and pinatas and pin cushions, with goodies like sugar cubes and sugar cane and sundaes and sunbeams and sarsaparilla. And I get to play my favoriteest of favorite fantabulous games like pin the tail on the pony. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala is the place for me. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala is the place for me. Because it's the most galloperific, terrific, galactical gala ever in the whole galaxy. Whee!
And I can see that working for Pinky, too, because she's got that kind of high-energy voice going.
Right, yeah.
Well, so that begs the question, then. Do you have a strong musical background? Because you are a good singer.
Oh, thank you. I studied theater. In high school, I did musicals. In college, I was a theater major. I went to graduate school and got my MFA in acting. And through all that, I was always taking voice lessons. So in my dream of dreams, I would be able to actually really write music. All I can ever muster up are silly ditties like this. And so yeah, I'm musical, but I'm not, I'm not a composer. I don't have that kind of talent.
Well, so moving to season 2, you wrote quite a few of the better episodes of season 2, including one of my personal favorites, the Cutie Pox. And I gotta ask, how much of you was in Apple Bloom when she had too many talents to deal with at once?
Gosh, I don't think I have as many talents as poor Apple Bloom was dealing with. But coming up with all the fun stuff for her to do it was a blast, because it was like, what are the various things? And, they all had to be physical and more, as you piled them on, just more horrible for her. I do often feel like I'm trying to do a million things at once, like her, though, whether that's talents or whether that's just a working mom, running around like a chicken with her head cut off. I think that's more, that's what Apple Bloom eventually kind of was. She was, and was spinning out of control.
Was it your idea to include the part where she speaks French suddenly?
Yes, it was.
Are you a French speaker yourself?
I took French in high school. So yeah, as Lauren and Rob and I were coming up with silly things, we were just adding. And for her, to have something that was, she was doing so many physical things, for then also on top of that, for her to have to speak French just seemed like another funny thing that messes things up. And for Applejack to be able to say, my sister's speaking fancy, and that kind of stuff was also fun.
People love that line. I mean, I know that a lot of people really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite lines from the second season. And I also know that the VAs who performed that episode really enjoyed performing it, especially Michelle Krieber, who does Apple Bloom. She said that it's one of her favorite episodes just because it was so fun to perform all those different, emotions. And also she got to showcase some of her French.
Right. And that's the other thing. Choosing French was brilliant because the actors speak French. So, I figured it was a pretty good bet that they could speak French. Being Canadian actors and such. So yeah, that worked out well. And she did a really good job. I can't, that would have been a hard thing to do. And she, to get her more and more frenetic through all of that, she really did a great job.
For your episode, A Friend Indeed, which features Cranky Doodle Donkey, you've got this character who in a lot of ways reminds me of the main character from the Pixar movie Up. He's an older, cantankerous curmudgeon. And then you've got, the secondary character, Pinkie Pie in this case, who in a lot of ways reminded me of the kid. Do you see that correlation, or what were your influences for writing that?
I definitely see that correlation. I can't remember, honestly, if in the story meeting we talked about that or not. But, that's kind of an old, you can go kind of to, Dennis the Menace even, that relationship of the annoying kid and the cantankerous old man. It's something that, choosing someone for Pinkie to annoy, going for somebody older because she's so childlike is a very fun choice. And maybe an obvious choice. So I don't know that I was specifically thinking of the old man in Up. I've talked about this before. I watched growing up a lot of I Love Lucy. So to me, he has a bit of Fred Mertz in him. But I mean, yeah, you can certainly say that there are similarities with Up. I don't remember if we talked about that in the story meeting. I'm sorry.
It's fine. I draw correlations where there aren't some sometimes. It just happens. So, okay, you mentioned that you're a big fan of I Love Lucy, and I know you've mentioned in other interviews that that you were really happy to be able to include an I Love Lucy scene in My Little Pony on the cherry farm in the last roundup.
Yes.
And I think that when the teaser for that episode came out and you see this still frame of Pinkie Pie wearing the hat, trying to find some way to process all the cherries, everybody instantly recognized it. It's one of those, I Love Lucy is one of those shows that everybody can just, boom, instantly recognize. And so I'm wondering if there are any other little hints, aside from what we just talked about in Friend Indeed, to I Love Lucy that people maybe didn't quite notice.
I mean, for me, the only other one, it's not a specific thing. It's more just Applejack's language. In I Love Lucy, they say things like "Good night, nurse," and I don't know if Applejack's ever said that. "Here's your hat. What's your hurry?" They speak. They have funny things in their language that's more old fashioned because it's an older show. And because I watched that show so much, I say those things in my life. And I think my daughter is one of the few people who says, "Good night, nurse." I don't think any of her friends know what the heck she's saying. So for me, when I was writing for Applejack, I was able to pull a bit from I Love Lucy as far as pulling kind of old fashioned phrases.
I think it's a fun thing to talk about in that, I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball, was coming from a background where the entertainment industry, when she was growing up, was really vaudeville. And so I think a lot of that language that got into the show in the mid to late 50s was coming out of a vaudeville comedy background. And if it's influencing how you write and how your daughter speaks, I think it's kind of funny to think about that something like Goodnight Nurse, which could have come out of that late 19th century, early 20th century, playhouse scene, is now making its way into a cartoon about ponies and into regular speech again as a result.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of historical film and also of I Love Lucy. When I get a chance to see it, it sometimes pops up, and it definitely has that kind of that hammy feel to it that especially episodes featuring Pinkie Pie really can play off of. So my hat's off to you, ma'am, for that scene in that episode.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun to write, and to be able to use such an iconic I Love Lucy bit and put a pony twist on it.
Well, and I think a lot of people also use that scene as a piece of evidence to show, when you're a brony and you're trying to convince people, no, it's not all about brushing hair and sparkles and such. You show your friends scenes like that one to say, look, there are references in here that adults can get too. There was one of those in the Ticketmaster, actually, where Twilight is running away from the crowd and you have this Benny Hill theme running in the background. Was that part of your script, or is that something that worked in later?
I'm pretty sure that was in the original script. That script was written by me and Lauren. And yeah, I would have to go back and look because there's some things that she wrote that I don't remember because she wrote them. But I'm pretty sure that it says Benny Hill style in the script.
Going back to the last roundup, there is a notorious scene that ended up getting changed featuring fan favorite Derpy. And I just wanted to say that I think your letter to the fandom describing that situation really kind of, in a lot of ways, quelled the waters after all of that drama. And so I just wanted to, thank you for that, on the record for, clearing that up for the fans.
You're welcome. I'm glad that helped fans understand the situation better. I've gotten a lot of emails since that letter went out, and I just want folks to know that I do understand that no mean intentions were ever meant in the naming of Derpy, that you all love Derpy and she is yours as, a fan creation. And I think embracing her for who she is and loving her is, what you guys have done and makes you just the most amazing fans out there.
Well, so speaking of fan creations, I wanted to know how much of the online fandom you've seen. And actually, that's kind of an odd question to ask given that BronyCon in New Jersey just happened, where you got to see 4,000 of them in person. But I mean, have you gone and seen some of the artwork or some of, even for that matter, the fan fictions that have been written, or listened to any of the music aside from maybe what you heard on stage?
I haven't really delved into that a lot. I mean, I did obviously see the fan art that was at the con, and I thought it was amazing. I don't read fan fiction as a rule because in the event that any episode that comes out is similar to a piece of fan fiction, I want to know that I haven't been influenced by fan fiction and, that somebody can't say, hey, I wrote something exactly like that and she read it. And so that's a rule I've had since I was on Powerpuff Girls, to not read fan fiction. And music, I've heard some of it. People send me links to stuff on YouTube, and then I obviously heard a bunch of stuff when I was at Brony Palooza.
Yeah, you and Tara Strong and Megan McCarthy was up there, I think, and it was crazy. I was at the back end of the crowd near the AV equipment, and it just looked like there was absolute, chaos happening up on stage. And then, of course, it actually did when John Delancey walked on stage. But I think that the fans out there, though, know what my next question is going to be. And this is kind of an evil question I ask everyone, and I got to ask it of you. Is there something from the fandom that you would like to see? Because as I tell everyone I interview, what you ask for will be done.
I honestly hadn't thought about it. I think the fans, are creating their own amazing things and are inspired by Pony. If I had a suggestion, I would sure give it, but I don't even think folks need suggestions. I think the creativity is out there and they're coming up with awesome stuff.
Well, before we go, I just wanted to ask you mentioned briefly earlier in this interview that you've been working on Care Bears. What exactly have you been doing with Care Bears? You are a story editor, is that right?
Yeah, so story editor. So basically, I have the job on Care Bears that Rob Renzetti had on My Little Pony. So as the story editor, you kind of shepherd all of the scripts. So you help come up with ideas, you hold the story meetings, you review all of the outlines and ask for notes, you review every script, you do rewrites. So yeah, I've been very, very busy on that show, which is now airing on the Hub. So check it out. It's been a really fantastic experience getting to be, again, I was lucky with both of these shows. I got to be there very early in the beginning when these shows were, getting off the ground. And so it's really been fun to be part of this relaunching of Care Bears.
Well, do you have any other upcoming projects, writing or otherwise, that you'd like the fans to know about?
Currently, I just have a number of irons in the fire. I've been pitching a show around. I've done just various, I guess you'd call them sizzle reels. So short scripts so that then people can go and pitch their show in the hope that it gets picked up. So I'm just waiting for what thing is going to kind of catch fire, I guess.
Well, if the current show that we've been discussing here today is any indication, I'm sure that something will catch fire. I have no doubt of that. Well, this has been Final Draft, and it's been my absolute honor to interview Amy Keating Rogers today. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And you all have been listening to Everfree Radio. Hello everyone, welcome once again to Everfree Radio. This is Final Draft, your host, and I'm here today with one of the noted writers of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, Miss Amy Keating Rogers. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, and so I'm going to start off with a very general question I always ask every member of the production crew, which is, how did you get involved with My Little Pony Friendship is Magic?
I got involved pretty early on because Lauren Faust and I are friends, and we worked together on the Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. And she had pitched this to Hasbro, and it was, kind of going through the process that any show goes through. They once you pitch something, they go over it with a fine tooth comb and make sure that everything is the way they want it to be. So she was waiting for the green light as this process was happening. And she said, "Oh, if we get picked up, I want you to write on it." And, I thought that sounded fantastic. A writers' brainstorming meeting where all the writers were gathered and we just kind of spitballed ideas around. And Rob Renzetti, the story editor, took notes through the entire meeting so that, so he knew what stories were possibilities. Then he and Lauren got together and batted those ideas around, picking the gems, coming up with their own stuff, shaping everything. And then they submit that to the network. And the network goes, "Yeah, we like this one. We don't really like that one." And you pick the best of that bunch. And you keep sending them bunches of ideas to fill out the season. Then those episodes, and we touched on this briefly in the writers panel, once you have those story ideas, Lauren would then assign the stories as best as possible according to people's availability and that kind of thing, assign them to people according kind of to their strong suits of what she knew that person would thrive at as a writer. Once you get your story idea, you have a meeting with Lauren and Rob, and it's just the writer and Lauren and Rob in a room. And we have a pile of index cards and a big blank wall, and we put up on the, 3 index. And so that's how I got into this.
Well, and Lauren's that kind of creative person, too, where if she says, "I'd like you to do something," I imagine that you're just like, "Yes, please."
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She and I work really well together, so I feel really fortunate that she wanted me to work on the show.
So I'm looking at your IMDb list, which is always a dangerous place to look because I'm told often by guests on the show that sometimes this isn't accurate.
Right.
Looking at your list of episodes you've written, you wrote The Ticketmaster, which was, I believe, the 3rd episode of the first season, Applebuck season, Bridal Gossip, Fall Weather Friends, A Dog and Pony Show, Best Night Ever. And these were really personal, character-based episodes for the first season. Was that a choice by the producers of the show or by the powers that be to have you write character-focused episodes?
I think Lauren wanted to start with character episodes. I mean, it's a character-driven show. And we really needed to learn who these characters were in order to then jump into, other kinds of episodes. And everything we tried to do is character-based. But yeah, we had to learn about, what is Rarity like? What is Applejack like? And really get to explore those characters. Because we're writing for kids, it helps kids.
Question about the process of writing for a cartoon, or more specifically for this cartoon, which is basically, how does it work? I mean, do the creators or the producers of the show come to you and say, "Okay, we need an Applejack episode," and suddenly you have Applebuck season? I mean, obviously scripts don't magically appear. What is the process for writing a script for an episode of My Little Pony?
Well, we're all freelance writers. All the writers on season 1 and 2 and on 3, they're freelance. So it's not an in-house situation. So you're not hanging out with everybody every day, bouncing ideas around. So for season 1, Lauren had actually come up with a number of those ideas in the original Bible. So we were kind of set up there with things that she had already thought of, which is what you do in a Bible. You establish all the characters, you tell about the world, and then you say, okay, if this went to series, look at all these episodes that we could write about these characters. This is the future of the show. So I know Dog and Pony Show was one of those. I'm trying to think. Applebuck season was one of the ones that was in the original Bible. So those were already established stories. Then I'm trying to remember if in season 1 we did have kids learn about who are these characters that they're following, and for the adult fans, it ends up that we ended up getting. I think it helped all of you guys really connect with those characters, it's the same thing we tried to do with the kids, but we achieved it also with adults.
Well, and you say ended up, getting that fan base. I mean, I imagine you were quite surprised by the whole Brony fandom when you first heard about it.
Yeah, we were very surprised by it. But I've said this a couple times. We had a male and an adult male fan base on Powerpuff Girls as well. So that was quite a while ago, and the internet wasn't what it is today. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have the level of fan sites that people put up now. There wasn't, there weren't blogs. There just wasn't all that stuff. So, but we did have a male fan base. So when I found out that we had a male fan base for this show, part of me was like, oh, it's like Powerpuff, because, that's what it reminded me of. That was my previous experience. And that was an unexpected fan base that we got on Powerpuff as well. It's just, this is just so much bigger.
Well, absolutely. I did want to take a step back and ask you a more general